With all the talk being about Boston College losing players to the transfer portal, we've been waiting for some good news, and we finally got some on Wednesday. BC lands their first commitment. I'm going to tell you all about it, tell you why I'm excited, and tell you who this guy is in just a moment.
You are Locked On Boston College, your daily podcast on the Boston College Eagles, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, Locked On Boston College. I'm your host, AJ Black. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150. If your team wins, visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Today, we've got a busy show. We're going to talk about transfer portals. I got Beacon Street Ball on again to talk about basketball. Let's get going. BC lost 11 players in the transfer portal over this early transfer portal period. There'll be another one later after spring ball. And, everyone's starting to worry about it. When you lose that many players, even if, as I've said, some of them are more situational players, depth players, guys that you're not going to really rely on, you start to worry because you're not getting any good news. It's all just, this guy leaves, this guy leaves, this guy leaves, this guy leaves. And when you're hearing that, it's tough to rationalize what's going on. As I've said, this is normal. This is normal what happens with a program. Now, finally, on Wednesday, BC got some good news as tight end Kamari Morales of UNC committed to BC. Now, if you were an Eagle Insider VIP, you knew that Morales was on campus last week. I reported out that I'd heard he was on an official visit. And he's an interesting kid. He's a 6'2" tight end, smaller, but still not tiny, and a veteran. He's been on UNC since 2019. He's their all-time leader in touchdowns for a tight end, more than Eric Ebron, which is an interesting little stat that I found out. And he had some really big years as a pass catching tight end for the Tar Heels. Now, last year, his role kind of it shrank. He fell down the depth chart a little bit, but he still has that talent. Now, why is this a big deal for Boston College? The Eagles just lost George Takis. Well, they lost George Takis in October for an injury, but they desperately needed depth here because you're bringing in Jeremiah Franklin, who is taking steps, but he's not. I don't think he's there yet. One more year, he may be, but you needed an experienced depth tight end. And this is a guy that's played in the ACC. He's a good pass catcher. He's a very well-respected. If you look at the UNC boards, this is a guy that has a lot of respect from the fans over there with the Tar Heels. So he is a good fit for BC. Now, next year, you'll have, if they go back to what they were doing with Thomas Castellanos, they're going with those like more jumbo sets, you're going to be using a lot of different tight ends. There were different times last year where they were using, George Takis and Jeremiah Franklin. Next year, they may be using Morales and Jeremiah Franklin. And we'll have Mitch Wolf on to talk about the different roles and how he could fit into that. But this is the first good get. Now, where does Boston College go from here? I've said that the Eagles are going to probably try to land, from what I've heard, anywhere between 15 and 20 transfers. As I've said, this is why the recruiting class is so small. And that's not just me saying that. That's what Jeff Hafley said. He had his press conference on Monday, and he basically said he's going to be going for guys that have experience. It's more than, he didn't say this part, but it's to save his job. You can't bring in true freshmen right now in college football and expect them at the BC level to immediately chip in and save a coach that's on the hot seat like Hafley is. He needs transfers. He needs guys like Morales who have played for a long time, that know what they're doing. And that's what BC lacked last year. Like, you look at the depth chart and the injuries that BC got hit with, and in the areas they got hit was the depth was the big issue. You look at the secondary, right? That's the one, we'll talk about that in just a moment. But all these positions, once guys went down, it was like, oh, here's a freshman, here's a redshirt freshman, here's a guy that hasn't played, here's a guy who's raw. Hafley needs those guys to marinate a little bit more. He doesn't need them to play right away and get going out there on that depth chart. He wants them to practice, to be, ready to go in a year or so. So a guy like Morales, that'll save a Matt Reagan. That might save a Holden Simmons from having to play when they're not ready. You may need Matt Reagan may be ready to go next year, but maybe he isn't. And if he's not, you got a guy like this that could go. Now, you look at the depth chart at tight end, it's still kind of light. You have Jeremiah Franklin, you have Morales, you have Matt Reagan and Holden Simmons. Hans Lillis, from what I've heard, and I have to double check on this. When I last talked to the staff, I believe he's gone. I believe that he might be moving on. He has never made an official transfer portal announcement or anything like that. But when I talked to the staff, I believe they said he's gone. So he's out of the area. And then Charlie Gordonier, I also have heard buzz that he's gone too. But again, he hasn't made an announcement, so I can't officially say that's exactly what's happening. He may have changed his mind, and maybe he's coming back. So there's still some space there, I think, for tight end. And maybe they go for another guy. Maybe, they just brought a JUCO in over the weekend with Morales, who's checking out a few other schools. Ryan Boltwood, I believe his name is, who's checking out Washington State and Arizona State. So when he says if he says he likes education, if that's really important to him, his choice should be pretty obvious there if that's really what he thinks. So good one. Now we'll wait and see. Now on Eagle Insider tomorrow, I believe I will be getting the official visitor list. Now you've seen on Twitter me putting up all the different offers that are going out. Offers are fun to look at, but these guys are getting like 30, 40 offers. A lot of these offers are kind of meaningless because if every school is offering them, what the hell does it mean? Like what is he really interested in? Now, when we get the visitor list, that is what kind of parses out the real from the fake, right? You're going to get the guys that are really interested in BC. So I'm dying to find out. Now, I've asked the staff, I was like asking them today, I'm like, come on, just tell me. And they're like, it's a fluid thing. We'll get you the list. Don't worry. So even I don't know who it's going to be now. And transfers are pretty quiet about it, unlike recruits who love to blab. So we'll have to wait and see there. Now, in a moment, I'm going to bring Beacon Street Ball on, and see, I didn't screw his name up this week, to talk about BC basketball. A couple injuries, but a big win over Central Connecticut. I'm dying. We haven't talked to Beak in a couple of weeks, so I'm going to bring him on to bring up what's going on, and he can talk a little bit about some big news of where he's going to be at and where you can find his work now. Now, as the weather gets colder, the NFL offers stay hot on FanDuel. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. Now, I don't even know what the spread is right now for the Patriots game against the Steelers, but hammer the under. Get the under on that right now. One of the most putrid offenses I've ever seen against a pretty decent Steelers team. I think whatever it's going to be like an Iowa Big Ten game where there's just like what the Patriots did with the Chargers. If you think they're going to not score points, and with the Ramondre Stevenson out, I don't know who's going to score on that team. Get on FanDuel right now. Even if you're wrong, if you win, you're going to get $150 if you just place a $5 bet. Now, that's easy money right there. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season with FanDuel, the official sports partner of the NFL. This is Locked On BC. I'm your host, AJ Black, and I'm really excited to be joined today by Beacon Street Ball. He was on a couple of weeks ago, and we had a great time talking, and I'm excited to have him back. Beak, how's it going?
How are you? I'm excited to be here and excited to talk ball again and see if we can give the people a little more insight.
So it's been since we've last talked, it's been an up and down a couple of weeks. It was a tough 2-game series over in Kansas City. You had the game against NC State where, a game they could have won. They didn't do it. Took care of business against Central Connecticut. So since we've last talked, last couple of weeks, talk about the kind of roller coaster that this team has been going through.
Yeah, so I because I am a crazy person, so I've been at every game so far. So I made the trek out to Kansas City, and I think, although I actually have it on in the background right now, Colorado State's in a barn burner with Denver right now. But that Colorado State team, last I looked, was sitting at 2 in the RPI and 7 in the net. So they're like a top 10 team in the country right now. So you lose that game, and I think it was pretty clear watching that game that Colorado State is a power. Like I expect them to contend for a top 5-6 seed come tournament time. So that one I'm okay with. The Loyola game, about as bad a loss as I can remember, just because of the collapse down the stretch with, I think they blew a 9-point lead in the last 3:54, if I remember correctly. And so that's good, or that's not good. But then they come back a week later, blow the doors off Vanderbilt in one of the better performances that I remember, definitely under Earl Grant, but really in the last 4 or 5 years, especially on the road. That's not something that this team or this program, I guess maybe better stated, has been very good at. And then you come back 4 days later and can't make a free throw to save their lives, and they lose to NC State. I don't know what to make of NC State. NC State lost by 20 to Ole Miss, beat Vandy by a couple, beat the Citadel in a tight game on opening night. So, some common opponents there. And I think BC is probably better than NC State, but when you're going to go 54% from the free throw line, not going to have a lot there. And then last night, I thought they played really, really, really well. I really did. I thought Earl did a good job with the rotations. I didn't love the walk-on usage. I wrote about this today, and we can get into that in a minute. But margin of victory matters. So a 14-point win over Central Connecticut in 3 months, when people are looking back, that's going to stand out. But I thought everybody played really well. It was nice to see Madsen make some shots, hand bounce back after what was sort of a gruesome. I mean, I don't really even think it was an injury because he bounced back, but went down at the end of that NC State game. So not a lot of complaints. I am very, very excited for Sunday against St. John's, and hopefully, take care of business Friday night, and then you're 7-3 going into St. John's in what should be a matchup with some juice.
Yeah, I was watching that Central Connecticut game, and BC, and I had to admit, I stopped watching once they were up by 30 or so, and then I saw that they won by 14, and I was like, what happened? Can you kind of explain? I saw that. I think the walk-ons let up 8 or 10 points or something.
Yeah,
like that.
14-0 run. Yeah, so basically, and I thought Earl did I've been hard on Earl all year for the rotations. Tough to be hard on him when he's up 28 and he decides to play the walk-ons. Probably is they may get a shot against Holy Cross, they may get a shot against Lehigh, but they haven't played much this year because games like the Citadel and Fairfield were probably a little tighter than maybe he wanted or the program wanted. So I have no real problem with playing the walk-ons, but again, as I just said, margin of victory does matter. So don't love that. Going back a little further, Fred Payne went down with an injury. We learned today that that's a season ender. I like Fred, and I'll be very honest, most of what I like about Fred is from his high school tape. So it's not like he showed us a whole lot, but he's a guy who came in and played hard defense, which Earl Grant really appreciates it. And I thought he was getting a little more comfortable in the offense. He got some minutes in Kansas City, and I feel comfortable saying this now. Fairly clear he either didn't know the offense or wasn't confident in the offense is probably a better way to put it. But, I thought he was coming into your zone, and they have a lot of guard depth, but anytime you lose a guy who I think he could have been a primary ball handler, that hurts. Claudel Harris didn't play last night. That I was told is precautionary. He could have gone if it mattered, which I take to mean as I would be shocked if we see him Friday night against Holy Cross, but he should be good to go for St. John. So that's good. But it really just comes down to, I thought Donald Hand, Mason Madsen, even Chaz Kelly, who didn't score. I saw some people online saying Chaz, in a game not to score. I thought he looked very comfortable with the ball, leading the offense, which I know is a humongous point of emphasis within the building, to get the ball out of Zachary's hands and really, allow him to work as sort of a scoring two guard. So I liked a lot of things from Chaz, and I wrote this in my post today, but the big difference from this year's team to last year's team is there's haven't really been a game. People will say that Citadel game was close. I was there. I didn't think it was that close for much of, the last 20, 30 minutes. But, this team's not playing with their food, as I like to say. They've taken care of business, and, you got 2 more chances against Cupcakes with Holy Cross Friday and then Lehigh in a couple of weeks. And you do that, and you're right where you want to be, in my opinion.
And I know Holy Cross gives a lot of BC fans PTSD because of the football game. But this Holy Cross team lost big to Central Connecticut, I believe.
Oh, they're terrible. Yeah, they're really bad. One of my buddies is pretty plugged in the Holy Cross athletic department scene, and they fired Brett Nelson, who was their coach, and they replaced him with somebody who I'm not going to know his name off the top of my head, but they're in an identity crisis, is what I would call it. They don't know what they want to be. I wrote this again today to keep referencing that, but they did beat Georgetown. So give them some credit there. Their second game of the year, they beat Georgetown by 1 in a shocker. And they haven't really been close since. They got, as you just said, they got blown out by Central Connecticut. I'm trying to quickly pull it up in the background here, but they've gotten blown out a couple times to really bad teams. They lost by 14 to Elon. They lost by 46 to St. John's, 25 to Maine. So they're losing to really bad teams. I don't expect it to be close, but I do expect you see very similar to what we saw last night, which is Earl's going to play a lot of guys for a lot of minutes, and you'll probably see Post for more than I want to see him with the game 36 hours later. But I know internally it means a lot to get Post some sort of national award, and that means you got to play him to get the numbers. So
yeah,
all you hope for in a game like that is nobody gets hurt. Lost Fred, which I hate to say it, but if there's one guy to lose, I'm not glad, but I would rather have been a guy down on the depth chart, which I know is bad to say, but hopefully nobody who matters, goes down, and we can move on to St. John's in a game that, like I just said, I think should be a really good one.
All right. I'm going to ask Beak in a couple of minutes for some more takes on where things are going with this program, some highs and lows. We'll wrap things up here in just a moment. But before I do that, I want to get into PrizePicks. PrizePicks is your daily fantasy sports experts, and it's a place to go if you want to turn your money 25 times more this football season. And now I can play basketball season too. You can select 2 or more players, pick more or less on their projected stats, and bam, place your entry. With basketball season here, you can now pick combo projections across football and basketball from the Specials Legend, a league created specifically for combo projections that includes Travis Kelce at a 10.5 combo of 3 points made along with LeBron James. It's crazy. You can do a whole bunch of stuff there. It's so easy to use. Right now, you can pick Steph Curry with 29 points or Nikola Jokic for more than 10 rebounds. Easy things to make, easy way to make some money. So testing my skills on PrizePick this season is the most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. They have injury insurance. They got everything on this site. And that's what I love about PrizePicks. Now they offer Apple Pay for quick and easy deposits in your account this football season. PrizePicks is where you need to go. So go to prizepicks.com/lockedoncollege and use code LOCKEDONCollege for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, that's prizepicks.com/lockedoncollege and use code LOCKEDONCollege with PrizePicks, daily fantasy sports made easy. This is Locked On BC. I'm your host, AJ Black. Before we get into our final segment, Beak and I have some really big news about our site. As we announced it on Twitter today, we announced it on the site. Beak is going to be one of our he's going to be our basketball writer, analyzing basketball games up on Eagle Insider. And Beak, I'm so excited that you're joining us.
Yeah, no, I'm excited. When we did this like 2 or 3 weeks ago, I love, this type of content, and obviously I'm very passionate about, BC basketball. So it's a good outlet, but I wrote about this because I was doing my own little blog thing before joining you here, but my whole thing is just getting more eyeballs on the basketball program. Anybody who knows me knows that it's a huge part of who I am. And you guys have a great network here and a great audience. And I'm excited just to, show the people a little bit more of BC basketball. It's not really about me at all. It's about BC basketball, and hopefully can provide some insight on sort of what, I know about the program and I observe. And whether it be the podcast, I'm hoping to do some video stuff with breakdown of plays. That's really my ultimate goal, is to, really dive into the offensive and defensive side of the ball, because that's just what I like to look at. and watching the game tape. So I'm really excited, and I think we can do a lot of cool stuff here. But I really appreciate you guys bringing me on, and hopefully, people enjoy the content.
Yeah, so head on over to Eagle Insider right now. I mean, I think we've built out quite a bunch of army of great writers. We got Beak doing basketball. BC Hockey is covered as well with some great content there. And you got Mitch doing football analysis. So if you want like the best BC coverage top to bottom, I think we got it. I'm really excited there. So I want to ask you, so what are some other observations you've had so far as the season has gone on? Is there any like little tidbits or things that you've kind of picked up on this team?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think the first thing that jumps out to me is Quinton Post is just so much better than I could have possibly imagined. I mean, I thought he was probably an all ACC guy at the end of last year. Didn't make an all ACC team. I think he won ACC most improved player, but didn't make a team, which is kind of baloney if you ask me. But going into this year, I thought he'd be very, very good. Did I think he would be arguably, a top 5-10 college basketball player? Absolutely not. He's been unbelievable. And the biggest difference is the defensive side of the ball. And at 7-1, you could make the argument that it's just attention to detail and maybe he cares a little bit more, but give him a lot of credit. He slimmed down in the offseason. He's far more mobile on the defensive side. And I think that if BC can win 18 to 22 games, there's going to be a real chance that he wins ACC Player of the Year, which for somebody like myself who believes Jerome Robinson was robbed of ACC Player of the Year 6 years ago, I really hope that Post can win it because it's crazy that BC in the last 6 years, in my opinion, could have the two best players in the 2 of the 6 years they could have the best player in the conference.
That's crazy.
So that's it's crazy.
And what's really clear, just as someone watching, like watching that Central Connecticut game, they had no one who could do anything to him. Like he
could have scored 40 if he wanted.
He was just at will. And then on the defense, as you mentioned, on the defensive side of the ball, anytime they tried to go at him, he just stifled them. Blocks, knocking the ball away. Like it was a clinic, and it's when you get a player that talented, it's a lot of fun to watch. Now I put up a picture of Armani Mighty because I find him fascinating right now. What have you seen in his development so far? Because I know he came from like a guy last year who looked real raw, but I've seen a lot. I feel like I've seen a lot of improvement out of him.
I couldn't agree more. So Armani has been playing basketball. I believe this is year number 5. So he started playing basketball like halfway through when he was 14, and he played up in Canada for a pretty solid AAU team, a team that some NBA guys have gone through. So it's a decent program, and he played a lot more of, because that's how AAU basketball is played nowadays. Like he played a lot of wing. He almost played a Giannis type role where he was handling the ball and he was, running a lot more, and not what he's being asked to do at BC is the point there. Yeah. And I think when he came here last year, you saw a guy who thought he could do more than he could. And I don't mean that in a bad way, but playing, Canadian AAU basketball when you're 7 feet tall, you can do a lot more with the ball than you can playing, Division I basketball. So I think he's done a really, really good job of coming into his own. You see him much more comfortable in the post. I think his footwork was always a strength, and that comes from, playing a lot of wing at the high school level. But defensively, he just has great instincts. And he came up playing some soccer too when he was younger. And that, I think, has a lot to do with it. I think he has a good nose for where loose balls are going. But I completely agree with what you're saying. I think the jump is incredible, and it's a testament to Earl Grant and the staff. Same thing can be said about Devin McLaughlin. I mean, Devin was as raw, and I love Devin, but he was as raw could be when he got to BC as a freshman. They redshirted him. He worked his ass off, and now he's, he'd start on every team in the ACC. So I'm really hopeful that come next year, Armani can play, 18 to 20 minutes. I'd be shocked if he starts. I know I'm getting way ahead of myself, but I firmly believe Earl's going to get to do his dream, which is the 4-guard lineup next year. I think he wanted to do it last year at the beginning of the year, and he just, was talked out of it. But I really do think you're going to see 4 guards next year. And so I don't think Armani will, assuming Devin doesn't transfer, I think he'll probably come off the bench, but I like what I see. And to couple on that, to not get too much on a tangent, I'm hoping we see the same from Jaden Hastings. Jaden Hastings, by all accounts, is just as hard a worker as anybody in this program. And they redshirted him because they liked what they saw in Armani and they just knew he wouldn't get a ton of minutes. So I think Earl has done a really good job in player development. And I think as a BC fan, to sort of tie it back into just athletics on the campus as a whole, right? Like that's really what you want to see is taking the talent that you bring in and developing it. And I think he's done a great job with it. And I have a lot of gripes with Earl, but that sure ain't one of them.
So let's wrap things up. But I have one last one last player I want to talk about. And it's a player that gives me flashbacks to some of the Al Skinner players, and that's Elijah Strong.
Yeah.
I love watching him play, and he's only been playing sporadic minutes, but he's like a ball of fire out there. And once he gets things controlled, I think he's going to be a lot of fun to watch.
Yeah. So some quick tidbits on Elijah. So Elijah had, and this could be slightly wrong here, but I know he had no high major offers. I believe he only had 2 other D1 offers. So
Yep.
He's an under-recruited kid. He's lost 30 pounds from his last game of varsity basketball. So that's probably February to when he showed up in August. And he apparently is like, I think Post and Zachary are gym rats, but Elijah's right there as well. Like he's working every single day. And from what I've been told in practice, he is the most energetic and the loudest guy, which is not something you usually see from a freshman and then 2, a guy who I'm sure it was very well communicated to him that spot minutes was going to be, the dream, let's say, for your freshman year. And I think Earl's going to be put in a position where he's going to have to play him. Good things happen when Elijah's on the floor. I'm addicted to screaming Eli whenever Earl puts him in the game. I've been fortunate enough to get to know his family, and they're all great people. And I just can't speak highly enough about, him. And I'm rooting for him. I think he's a guy who can help this team win in conference play. And I never thought I'd be saying that when, he got signed, 10 months ago, but he's just a winner.
Yeah, I remember covering his recruitment and talking to his high school coach, and his coach was like, you got to see what this kid can do. Because he sent me some film, and it was like, just like what you see now, but a man among boys. And to see him already starting to show, he just seems like an eagle through and through. So it's a lot of fun to see that. Now,
I agree.
Now, we got to wrap things up because unfortunately on lockdown, we got to keep our podcast around 30 minutes. So Beak and I were talking, and we're going to probably have him on every week to talk basketball, whether it's after a game or previewing a game. We're going to have him on a couple times, once a week to talk about BC basketball, because we love to have experts here on our show. So we'll have him on next week. We'll figure it out. Talk about the St. John's game. We'll get into it. Right.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Like I said, anything you guys want to do, I'm here for it, and we'll just keep giving people the basketball coverage they deserve.
Yep, and obviously check out his written work over at Eagle Insider. Beak, where can people find you on Twitter?
Yeah, so on Twitter, it's just at Beacon ST Ball, Beacon Street Ball. If you type it in, it'll come right up, and I appreciate anybody who follows, and if you don't follow, I appreciate it as well.
All right, and this is AJ Black. Thank you all for following, and all of you who have just subscribed to Eagle Insider, I want to welcome you all as well. And if you hit the like and subscribe button on this podcast, love that as well. We'll be back again tomorrow. I will previewing a big weekend in transfer portal visits. We'll start to look at all the weekend activities heading up for BC basketball and hockey. We're going to have a whole lot to talk about. You're not going to want to miss it here on Locked On BC, your team every day.